How's it going, everyone? It is now February, and we're getting into more of an exciting movie month for 2019. But before we get into more of those movies that are going to be coming out later this month, I want to do something new that I'm going to do every month on my channel, which is discussing every single movie that I see in a given month. Honestly, I don't have enough time to be able to review every single movie that I watch here on YouTube. I post some reviews on Facebook, for the ones that we're going to be talking about here. But overall, for anyone who doesn't follow that page, I want to give you a whole entire summary of everything that I watched in a given month, in which I rank all the movies that I saw, and then that kind of gives you a sense as to what movies you should watch, ones you should avoid, and who can hopefully catch up with before they leave theaters. So to start things out then, I'm going to mention all 7 movies that I watched in January 2019 that were brand new releases, and I'm going to rank them from worst to best. Starting things out at number 7, we have the film Serenity, which was written and directed by Steven Knight. This movie does not work at all. There are some good things about it where I can kind of see where the director is going with certain story beats and the themes of it all. But the film doesn't build to anything satisfying, especially because it has a twist towards the last 30 minutes of the movie that recontextualized everything in a way that it doesn't make sense. And the film just keeps going on and expects you to care, but it just keeps getting even worse, more cringeworthy, and makes less and less sense as it goes on. There were good ideas at play in this movie, but it ultimately just doesn't work at all. Number 6, we have Io, which was a Netflix original film that came out on January 18th. This is another film where I can kind of see where the director was going with certain things and building up his story, but this was honestly one of the most boring films I have watched in quite a while. Which is a shame, because this film does look quite good, and these are good actors in the main roles, like Margaret Qualley, who is Andie MacDowell's daughter, and you also have Anthony Mackie in the lead role as well. But ultimately, there wasn't enough energy or emotional impact in any of the storytelling to make it something that you can care about. For a movie that's less than 90 minutes, it feels like it drags on for 2.5 hours, just because the plot has no stakes to it, and nothing ever really happens. The next one we have is Modest Heroes, which is the second film from Studio Ponoc. I mentioned their first film, Mary and the Witch's Flower, in my top 10 most disappointing films list for 2018. This is yet another film from them, which had a lot of potential going in because it was a compilation of 3 different short films. And yet this was another film that vastly disappointed me because there was so much potential for these shorts to be unique and individualized because they all have different art styles. However, none of them really feel as if they have much staying power. They're kind of just quaint little shorts that might keep you entertained for a short while, but they ultimately don't have much of an impact. I'm really intrigued by the idea of making films that are just compilations of different shorts altogether, especially since they're anime. But I'm hoping that the next films that they come up with are more compelling than this one. But next we have Escape Room, which was the obligatory horror film to be released in the first week of January. This was okay for quite a while. I can see kind of the interesting ideas that they had for developing a story and to actually keep you invested. Earlier on, there were actually a lot of entertaining sequences of genuine suspense and tension, especially because you have characters that are going back and forth, arguing with one another and trying to learn how to work together. But ultimately, by the end, which is honestly a pretty horrible ending, it doesn't really give much of a payoff to what you saw before, and it ultimately just feels lackluster and disappointing. At number 3, we have M. Night Shyamalan's Glass, the conclusion to the Unbreakable trilogy. There are a lot of people who are disappointed by this movie, and I completely understand the reasons why that was the case. However, despite the issues that I personally have with it, I can't discredit this movie solely because of its disappointing ending, because there's so much great stuff leading up to that. And even with the issues that I have with the ending, I can still see where M. Night Shyamalan was going in terms of his themes. And looking back on it, I appreciate the message that they shared, and I still appreciate the fact that this brings an end to a story that does have tonal consistency from beginning to end, and it has some interesting philosophical themes to think about. Close to the top, we have perhaps the biggest surprise of the year so far, and that would be The Kid Who Would Be King, written and directed by Joe Cornish. I was hoping this would be good anyway, because I love Joe Cornish's first film, Attack the Block, a highly underrated sci-fi action film that came out in 2011. So this came out 8 years after that original film, and while it doesn't have quite the same energy or spark or creativity, this is a legitimately entertaining family adventure that one doesn't have to make the excuse that it's for kids, because there is value for both children and for adults here, both in terms of its entertainment value, its solid characters, and the fact that it appropriates King Arthur and his legends into modern times in ways that feel compelling, relevant, and don't feel out of place either. It's a very fun movie, and if you have a chance to see it, please do, because it hasn't really found an audience here in America, and I think it deserves that. We deserve family films that are actually well made, fun, and actually leave people with a good message. But the fact that people aren't going to this is pretty sad. That being said, despite how fun The Kid Who Would Be King was, my favorite film for January 2019 was Fyre, a documentary released by Netflix. This documentary focuses on the Fyre Festival, which I personally didn't know about prior to watching this. But now that I have watched it and understand everything that took place here, I was horrified. Because as a marketing graduate of Arizona State University, a lot of these things that they talk about here in terms of marketing something and then trying to actually execute a plan into an actual event, that's something we talk about a lot. And then seeing how this documentary details how infamously disastrous the Fyre Music Festival was, it was personally meaningful to me as someone who was a business student at ASU. But honestly, this film just has a lot of entertainment value and thrills just from watching a very charismatic entrepreneur turn out something that ended up being a PR nightmare for the company that he was involved in. For me and my background, and like with just how well made this documentary was, I found it to be a bit more satisfying than any other film that I watched this month. And I'm grateful that Netflix provided this documentary to me because it just further cemented the fact that our society is such an obsession with social media and trying to be the best in the world that, there are consequences for those that go too far in their ambition. So with that, Fyre is the movie of the month for January 2019. And if you have a Netflix account, I'd strongly encourage you to check this out because it is very interesting, entertaining, and it actually ends up being pretty horrific and thrilling by the last 30 minutes or so. Guys, I am so excited for February. There's going to be some great movies coming out this month, like Lego Movie 2, How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for that one. Along with some other little gems that seem pretty interesting. But otherwise, I thought this was a better January than most. Let me know in the comments if you liked any of these movies that I mentioned here. And as always, please subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Please check out my Letterboxd and Facebook pages as well. And you guys have the rest of your day. Thank you.